Yet again, in my attempts to gaslight my friends into playing 40k, I've been posed a question that I think other people would like to have answered too. It's a question that only a load of Mass Effect fans would want to have answered. Xenos. Why can't we fuck? Why can't we be friends with Xenos? In the grim darkness of the future, there is only war, and peace is for nerds who don't lift. But allying with Xenos is not as far-fetched as you might believe. After all, the Emperor never wanted to murder every alien. He only wanted to destroy chaos, safeguard humanity, and make sure that humans were at the top of the galactic food chain. It was never explicitly stated he wanted to kill all the aliens. Granted, he and his people did, a lot, but that was mainly because they were in the way and could cause problems later. Let me tackle this in a way that's easy for me to explain and, better yet, easy for you to understand. Which means a tier list. Yes, I have finally reached the apex of YouTube entertainment. Most friendly will go at the top, and least friendly will go at the bottom, with a whole spectrum of niceness in between. Just to be extra official, let me set the stage for in-universe as well. The Great Rift has just opened. The Eye of Terror 2.0 is live, finally creating an opening big enough for the demon Primarchs to waddle their fat asses into the physical realm. The amount of demons per capita has been squared. Chaos infrastructure and civil engineering is entering a new golden age. And the Imperium's going, oh shit, we're gonna need to call in some pinch hitters, hire some contractors, build some bridges. All the euphemisms for, we need help with this. So let's say one day Gilliman, the Lion, and Lehman Russ, because I'm hoping to future-proof this video a bit, they all quietly gather around the table and shoot the Ordo Xenos in the kneecaps. Or maybe more appropriately, pull a Games Workshop and the Death Watch, the Emperor and the Thunder Warriors. Point is, they're gone, and the Primarchs are free to make a short list of potential allies to call in when the demons, traitors, and chaos in general gets a little too close to Terra. Heading down the list in alphabetical order means of course beginning with the Eldari. This is the easiest of easy allies. First, our two species look very similar. There's not much of a visual species gap to get over. They're just a little taller, a little skinnier, and have slightly more aerodynamic ears. And they all know a ton about the warp. Like a concerning amount about the warp. Then there's the obvious pitch that the Imperium has allied with the Eldari a lot. I mean, never officially, it's still all very under-the-table, backrooms, the spy who loved me stuff, but it happens with a discouraging frequency. You can ask the entire planet of Talaran. For the God Emperor's sake, you can ask Gilliman himself. In both cases, the Eldari proved themselves to be a massive help to the Imperium. I'm surprised the Ordo Xenos and the Death Watch hasn't A, caught wind of this whole phenomenon, and B, imploded when they learned about it. The only reason the Alliance isn't more official is because grimdark. No friends allowed. Friends are for prep kids who don't lift. Then too, they're not human. The Ordo Xenos and the Death Watch are still a thing. And it should be said that the Eldari can be a little smug, since they know so much about the warp and expect everyone else to get on their level, only to suffer continuous ennui when it turns out that no one is on their level. And they do tend to be very emotionally repressed and distant, which you can't totally blame on them. Eldar, as a species, tend to have a very vivid tapestry of emotions. Hypothetical example, when something gets them down, they can go into a crying slump that lasts 15 years. So we can cut them some slack for doing the whole Vulcan thing. That's the Star Trek Vulcan, not our Vulcan, who should never be kept in the same sentence as the Eldar for numerous reasons. Rating for the Eldar, canonical friends, because whatever can be said for or against them, there are at least 2 examples I can list off the top of my head of these 2 species working together, and there are definitely more. Leave your favorite time someone stuck it to the Ordo Xenos by working with the Eldari in the comments. From one elf race to another, there's the Drukhari. Now, the Drukhari can be allies, just not with humans. I can only recall one human ever working with the Drukhari willingly and in good spirits, and that was Fabius Bile. And I have to refer to Bile as human with extra strength air quotes. The rest of the time when a Drukhari works with a human, it's a homunculus, and the partnership is, shall we say, heavily one-sided. You can't ally with the Drukhari. It's an impossibility. Besides the fact that an Eldar's mind is a maze of thoughts leading from one to the next in a train of logic only they fully understand, beyond the fact that the Drukhari version of that maze was made by Jigsaw, you only have one thing that they want, and that is you. They want your ass, or your eyes, or your skin, or your nuts. So unless you're willing to suffer Dr. Chandranard's fate from Hellraiser 2, which I don't think any of us would like very much, there is nothing the Imperium can give them. The Drukhari are the living embodiment of the phrase, "fuck you, got mine," which plants them firmly at the bottom in Don't Make Me Laugh. Continuing in the theme of factions that want to do horrible things to the minds and bodies of unsuspecting people, the Genestealer cults, which are very different from the Tyranids via the international law of Games Workshop. So, can you ally with the Genestealer cults? I mean, they were human at one point. They came from human stock, use human gear, and some of them even look human. Some of them? So, could they be relied on to back up the Imperium? Not a fucking chance! Genestealers are loyal to the Hive fleet first and only. Plus, it's a death cult, even if they're not totally aware of that. Their greatest aspiration is to be melted down into biomass, which, if they're lucky, might go to feed one of the more important bugs. So how are you gonna argue with that? Don't become goo for them, become goo for me! And like the Drukhari, there's only one thing to offer them. More people who they can brainwash with mind parasites, and I think that's going to be a deal breaker at the negotiations. Genestealers, don't make me laugh when it comes to an alliance. Plus, they're not bringing anything to the table. Literally everything up to and including the people are things that were stolen from the Imperium. But there are legal ways to acquire things from the Imperium as seen by the Leagues of Votann. Very seriously, it's all the same. Bolters, plasma, and they're even terming their stuff las for their laser weaponry. The key difference is that the Votann stuff is just way better, and they can build it en masse. I'm pretty sure that Votann are just humans that evolved a little differently from being so far in deep space, but I have to put the pretty sure caveat there because Votann lore is still relatively new, and I'm not 100% bulletproof on that. Still, they do more than look human. I mean, they're grown in tubes, but so are the Mechanicus for the most part. Point is, they have enough biology in common to at least pass as abhumans/mutants. And yeah, I mean, the Imperium doesn't like mutants, except for the times that it loves mutants. It's really just the horrendous ones, the useless ones, which are not the Votann. The dwarves are highly fucked. Really the only thing that keeps them from being at that top tier is being so new, there's not a lot of stories of them actively aiding the Imperium. I mean, we've got some art of them hanging out with some Imperium dudes, but what I'm really looking for is them helping out in some battle. ready to gun down the chaos filth with some Astartes. Remember, this is all in service of putting together our doomsday call sheet. So the Votann are robbed from a seat at the top by virtue of limited stories, and my resident psychic is still at the dry cleaners, so couldn't tell me what the future holds for their lore. Still, they nab a high spot in very likely. I'll tell you what though, Necrons. Here we have a faction that is ready to play nice. For the most part. I'll grant you that when people arrive on their tomb worlds and set about reviving them, they don't come out ready to shake hands. But again, I'm willing to cut them slack. If someone came to my underground palace where I was in hibernation and shook me out of my several eons long nap time, would I be reaching for the peace treaty or for the Gauss blaster? I get where they're coming from. Their leadership is a strong point in their favor. Trazyn the Infinite, shown many times to work with humans, easy to get along with so long as you make the appropriate oohs and ahs at his gallery. Illuminator Xeris is another guy who works with humans, though it's more in the Drukhari way of working with humans. Imhotep the Stormlord, a very rational guy. And the Silent King, trying to collect his people to gear up to fight the other biggest threat in the galaxy besides chaos. Could bring him in with a little bit of you help us, we help you sort of thing. About the only guy you can't work with is Orokin, and that's because he's Orokin. It is true that the Necrons can be rather spooky as metal skeletons, but they can modify themselves to be much less spooky. No, the real problemo is that the Necrons want to be the ones ruling the galaxy and only intended to keep humans around as vassals, which would directly work against the Big E's plan for a human-dominated galaxy, but this is a post-war discussion. And, I'm just gonna say it, being a Necron vassal might not be the worst thing ever. Just imagine, you're kept in some kind of Truman Show-esque human wildlife preserve with a bunch of other people. They give you your food, open spaces, and healthcare, like any good zoo. Or you become the mind-shackled slave of some Ferak, and get to stare at her robo-butt for the rest of your life. She doesn't care, she's been a robot for so long she's forgotten all about sexuality. Either way, that sounds like a good deal. I'd make that deal. Would you make that deal?
I'd make that deal. I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
All this lands the Necrons up at the very top in canonical friends. Not quite far enough to surpass the Eldari, but definitely close enough to make the elves have to work to keep their lead. Then there are the Orks. A peace treaty with Orks sounds like a cause so lost it should involve a plane crash on a weird island. Orks love to fight. They fight with everything for no greater reason than that they love to fight. When they can't fight with other species, they fight with each other. Orks can't even keep the peace within their own kind, which means there's no way they'll ever work with the Imperium, if it wasn't for the fact that they already do. Let me tell you briefly about one of the most hated and distrusted Ork clans out there, the Blood Axes. Not hated by the Imperium or the 40k community at large, I mean hated by other Orks. Because the Blood Axes don't act like usual Orks. They use stealth, they plan their attacks, and they have been known to work openly with the Humies. Partly it's knowing their foe, and partly it's because the Blood Axes are the smartest, read most conniving, of all Orks. However, there are more examples than just that. I seem to recall a story where Orks and the Imperial Guard teamed up when some Tyranids started muscling in on them. I can't cite specifics because I'm saving my research energy for other videos, but I wouldn't state it if I wasn't confident. Enemy of my enemy is my friend, and all that nonsense. All that being said, this is the exception rather than the rule, but it is an exception. What has happened will happen, which can get the Orks a spot in right circumstances. From pure melee to pure ranged, and pure Michigan is somewhere in between, we have the Tau Empire. Honestly, this feels like one alliance that should be extremely easy, save for that pesky Ordo Xenos on one side, and the Tau Ethereal Caste on the other. But there are still the Gwe Vesa, which is Tau speaky Low Gothic for human helper. They already have humans on their side helping them out. And for the Imperium, maybe they don't want to deal with the Ethereal Caste and their notorious bullshit. So look up Commander Farsight. Great guy, defected from the greater good, now lives on his oil rig in the Indian Ocean. What's a Hind D doing in the Immaterium? The only thing that really bars the Tau from a spot at the top table between the Necrons and the Eldari, I don't know any stories where they fought beside the Imperium. Yeah, it's the Votann problem again. I'm not saying that these stories don't exist. I'm mildly confident that they do. I just don't know them. Politics has gotten in the way here the way it never did with the emotional space elves who are trying to play the long game, or the Egyptian robots who are just doing whatever the hell they want. So the Tau don't get the top spot, but I feel good still placing them in the very likely category. Finally, at the very bottom we have the Tyranids. You can't negotiate with a hungry lion when it's got your nether regions in its mouth. Which is completely true of the Tyranids. They want food, and we're the food. I don't know of anyone who will open a dialogue with their steak or salad before they eat it. This should land the Nids solidly in the bottom tier with no hope of ever making an alliance. But maybe not. Like I say, the Tyranids attack humanity and the rest of the species in the Milky Way, not because they hate, not because they want to be the ones ruling the galaxy, not because they owe rent to the god of excess. It's just because they're hungry and they need sustenance. It's completely impersonal with them. Maybe with a few dozen garden planets, teach the Tyranids how to farm, maybe we could bring them into the armistice carriage. It's just a thought, and for all that talk, all it gets them is moved up one tier, from lost cause into nigh impossible, and that's all there is to it. And by all there is to it, I mean disbanding the Ordo Xenos and Deathwatch, by force if necessary, changing the beliefs of the ecclesiarchy, undoing numerous millennia of dogma against aliens, and that's all before we get to meeting their demands. But I believe, if anyone can do it, it's Reblog Guillemont. That's it. After this video, I don't know what we're gonna do. Not that I'm out of ideas, I have many ideas, including more characters I need to teach you about in comically disparaging ways. However, those are very lengthy projects that need a lot of time to cook. So we need these little guys in between to keep up the pace every week. And I don't know what that will be next. Maybe we'll do more 40k memes. Those were always easy and people seem to enjoy them.